Welcome everybody to the February edition of the Kimberbell Digital Dealer Exclusives for 2026. We are working this year on the mystery quilt titled Mistletoe Mystery. And we are almost caught up here at Material Girls. I gave you 3 months really fast, and from here on out, you should have your instructional video at the first of the month when the new design launches in your digital library. This month, we are working with Jingle. So our block this month is a bell. We also have a few pieced filler blocks to do this month, which we will talk about here in just a little bit. We are going to do our embroidery first, and then we will come back to the pieced fillers. These are a little different than they were from last month because we need to sew them together and then quilt them as a unit. So that will be fun. February's design, we are working with your hoop sizes of the 5x7 or 8x8. This is the same size file as we used for the December bonus, the ornament file. So you could use that midi hoop with those exceptions of the few lines that fall outside of the hoop, but would fit in that Bernina midi. It does fit in the Bernina medium clamp hoop as well. Our standard stabilizers, our polymesh cutaway, our fusible woven lining, which goes on the back of both the background fabric and the back of the bow fabric. Okay, and the bow fabric is kind of like a knit sweater material. So we're going to fuse fusible woven on the back of it so that it won't stretch. And then our thread colors. Note that the taffy down there at the bottom is only used in the quilting part of our pieced filler blocks. So there is no taffy in our main bell block here. All right. This month we have our fabrics. We have a background, we have the green stripe, and we have a piece of applique glitter sheet that's silver, and the red knit fabric, which you will find, both of which you will find in the embellishment kit. They're already in there for you. And there are also 2 little silver bells in there. Just set those to the side. We don't need those until the quilt is assembled. You want to iron the fusible woven, if you've not already, to the back side of the background fabric and the bow knit fabric. And you can see the 3 colors that or 4 colors that are used in the block, one of which is the quilting, which is the white. In the cool gray, in my original list that I gave my participants, the cool gray was going to be, I gave you 2 options, either 182 or 3971. For this design, I used 182. I thought it matched / blended better with the silver glitter. And we're going to set up this design with our quilting. We are going to use the Christmas 17 collection. We are going to use the 6x6 design. The quilting is going to be opened and our bell will be centered in the middle of the quilting file, just like we have done for the last 2 months. This is pretty identical to what we did in placing that December bonus block, the ornament. We just changed out the background quilting and the center design. All right, once you have quilting finished, you are going to get out your glitter piece and we are going to peel off the plastic film. Okay, that's the important part. So you'll work through your steps of quilting just like we have in previous months. If you are just joining us, feel free to go back to our previous 2 videos, both bonus December and January, and I walk step by step through this section. I've gone ahead for this month and jumped ahead because it's nothing different than what we've already done. So that first color stop is going to give us a placement line for the bell, and then we're going to place this glitter fabric on top. There is a clear piece on the glitter. So we want to make sure that we remove that plastic film from the glitter. So just kind of get a hold of it with your fingernails here and pull, just like that. This is trash. This is what we need. I've left the white thread in and I have run the placement line. You can just barely see it here. And I've left it in white. We're going to take this glitter piece, shiny side up, and we are going to cover up that placement line. Now, it gets to be a little challenging once we tack this down to see that tack down line so that you know where to trim. Because this design is going to be satin stitched around the outside edge, so I can see the pink here is going to be the satin stitch. That means that my tack down and cover are going to be completely covered. So if you struggle at seeing that tack down to trim, go ahead and run your tack down in a brighter color. Okay, run it in red, run it in green, anything like that. Now that's, again, is only going to work if our cover stitch for that section is going to be a satin. In this case, it is. So I have my placement line, I have my glitter sheet right side up on top, and I'm going to run the tack down. Now you can see that after we have it tacked down here, you can barely tell where it's tacked down at. I can just barely see it, but I can tell when I peel it back. We're going to take this and we are going to trim the glitter as close to the placement line as we can. Okay, so just as we've done with a fabric applique, we're going to do the same with our glitter sheet. I can tell you that the glitter sheet does kind of perforate and peel. So if you have a hard time knowing where to start, if you just carefully kind of put your finger in there on the stitching, don't just rip, but kind of support the stitching, you can see where the design is going to be, and you can peel it away. Now you can absolutely do this all the way around instead of using scissors, but you want to be careful you don't get too aggressive in your pulling because you don't want to pull it out of the stitching. Okay. Now, once this has been trimmed, we are going to return it to the machine, but we're not going to do the cover stitching yet. We are going to work through the process of appliquing our bow first. So just like we've done in the past, we're going to run our placement line. We are going to do it in the gray thread. We are then going to place our fabric right side up, looking at the direction of the rib of the knit. We want it to run up and down, okay, from top to bottom, not side to side. And then we're going to tack it in place. And then once it's tacked in place, we will then trim it. Once it's trimmed, we will run the satin stitch for the outside of our bell. And we're doing all of this inside of with the gray thread. Here is my fabric, my knit fabric. There's my backing is ironed to the back. My direction of my rib or my knit is going to go top to bottom over top of this area. Okay, make sure that it's all covered. I also want to be as straight as I possibly can. And then we're going to run the tack down. There is our trimmed bow applique. We're going to go back over to the machine and we're going to run the satin stitch for our bell. So we're going to stay in the gray thread color. Once our bell is stitched, we are going to work through the process of appliquing the green stripe. So I'm going to go ahead and change my thread to the pine thread color. For me is 5643. I am going to run the placement line. I'm going to place my fabric right side up, covering all of that placement line. And then I'm going to tack it in place, trim it, and run the decorative stitch around the outside edge. After we appliqued the bell, they suggested or told you to head over to the iron and iron your glitter down. The glitter sheet has a adhesive backing to it. You could have gone over and ironed it down right away. I actually wait until this point and then go give it an iron, or you can even wait till it completely comes off the machine. Basically, the whole point of that is to um, activate the glue so that it adheres to the background fabric. And it really ultimately does not matter where and when you do it. I just usually like to have a little bit more tacked down so that I can make sure everything is there. So I am going to take my hoop off the machine. I'm going to head over to the ironing board. I am going to cover up my particular piece here with a piece of fabric. So a pressing cloth, okay, just something to protect the iron from sitting on that fabric for a long period of time. Nothing fancy, doesn't have to be anything overly elaborate. We're just protecting from sitting here. So I'm going to cover that up. I'm going to take my iron, which is hot, and I'm going to press it on top of that glitter piece for about 15 to 20 seconds. And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on this. I usually just kind of lean on it with my elbow while I count, because we just want to hold this here long enough to activate the glue so it will adhere to the background fabric. There we are, adhered. Now don't panic if you see that your satin stitching of your bell went into your bow. Don't worry, because we're going to applique our bow and it's going to cover that set up. We're going to now come back to the machine and we're going to finish the steps of appliquing that green trim. Our next step is going to run the satin stitch for the bow and the bow details. Now, this particular fabric that we're stitching on has a texture to it. Now, they do not say anything in the instructions about covering that with a water-soluble topping, which is what we normally would do for a fabric with a texture. So I'm going to recommend, I did one without it, and I'm going to do this one with it so that we can see if there is a difference. But I am going to cover this bow with a piece of Stitch 2.0, or you can use a piece of Badge Master, anything along that lines to cover up that knit fabric. This is going to allow the stitching to sit on top of and not be buried into. And this will be completely removed when this color stop is finished. So we're going to run the color stop. I have in my Pinot color, which I use is 2113 for this step. Let's pause here for a second so I can talk about if you ever question, have I trimmed enough away so that it doesn't show on the outside of your satin stitching? Typically with a satin stitch, you are going to see the system kind of put down two outer lines. You're going to have a line to the inside and a line to the outside. So think of those are the two basically supports to your satin stitch, and then it will come back and zigzag between them. Anything that is sticking outside of that zigzag is going to show once the stitch is finished. So anytime you're doing a satin stitch applique, you may want to kind of watch when the system does that zigzag and then stop the machine and do any additional trimming that you need. Okay, once your design is finished, we can take the hoop off the machine and we can remove the water-soluble piece. Here's my water-soluble. I started taking it off. And I'm just going to, you can use a pair of tweezers. You could just take a wet paper towel in here, which is probably what I will do to get rid of this section right here. I have a paintbrush around here somewhere that I will just wet and get rid of that. I do think it did make a difference. This is Badge Master that I used, and it is fairly stiff, okay? And it's older Badge Master, which means it's even stiffer to it. But I do feel that it did give you a better edge if you covered that up with the water soluble. I'll show you my other one here in 1 second. So you don't, it doesn't look like much, but you can see that it is smoother here. And up close, again, can't see it here, but it's kind of in the middle of my satin stitching. It's kind of bumpy because the knit is poking out from the satin stitch. Whereas on this one, that water soluble is still underneath, so it's keeping the knit from wanting to poke through my satin stitch. Okay, so do your bells. You're going to make 2 for this month. And then next up, we are going to talk about our pieced filler blocks that we need to do for this month. Okay, let's talk about these filler blocks because I'm going to do them a little different than the instructions just because I think piecing them in the hoop is a little silly, personally. So we have 3 combinations of filler blocks that we're going to use in this section. So we have these 3. You need to pay attention to the directionality of this stripe here on filler block 18. That's there. And then we will eventually need to pay attention to the orientation of all of these pieces. Now, in the instructions, they are going to tell you that you're going to use all the same design. So we're using Christmas 17 in the 2x4 file. Block number 9, we're going to be quilting in white, and block 16 and 18 we're going to be quilting in the taffy. The quilting design is centered inside of the piecing design. So we need to piece and then quilt. So organizing this is backwards from what we normally do, where we would normally bring in the quilt design first and then bring in the embroidery design. We're going to actually bring in the embroidery file and then bring in the quilting file. So we have something a little different than we normally do for this project. Let's take a look at how we would create this project. So in your folder under embroidery files, we have a design that looks like this. Looks like just a rectangle with a line in the middle. That is our piecing design. Okay. One of these will fit into a medium hoop. And then we would add the quilting design. Okay, so we're in February. Block by block, EXP, and we want 2x4. All right, and there it lands inside of our design, which is fine and dandy. And this is the way that these steps are going to go. So ultimately what we're doing is we're going to paper piece in the hoop. We are going to sew these units together with a seam, and then we will take it out and quilt it. Okay, it is 1 seam, it is 2 squares. Now, if we're talking little tiny triangles and things like that, absolutely I would piece inside of this hoop, but it's not. It's just 1 seam. But I'm going to walk you through how to do it, and then I'm going to show you what I did. So the first thing that you would do in your poly mesh stabilizer is you would stitch the template. This template is going to stitch a basically 2 rectangles or 2 squares with a rectangle around it. Fabric number 1 is going to get pieced. Now you can pick up whatever one that you want because ultimately this block can be rotated. But you just make sure you put your combinations together that matches what is suggested for the units. We're going to take fabric number 1. we're going to place it over top, filling all of placement piece section 1, okay? So we're going to take fabric 1 and we're going to cover all of this placement line that we have here. Everything inside of here. Placing it right side up. Once we've placed it right side up, we're going to stitch a line. That line is going to be our tack down. It's only going to happen there through the middle. We will then stitch it and then trim the excess from the top. So we're going to trim above that line. We will then take our second piece of fabric, place it right side down, lining it up with wherever you trimmed. Okay, so line this up, basically raw edges together, and then stitch the third color stop. This is going to be our 1/4 inch seam. Okay, this is important. Color stop 3 is important for later down the road. To do it my way, it's important. So we're going to run color stop 3, then we fold fabric number 2 right side out, and then the next color stop will be the tack down that's going to stitch all the way around to hold this in place. Okay. I would go through, okay, piece that, and then you're going to do your quilting. But you're like, but we didn't put any batting down. How can I quilt? So we need to make some adjustments. All right. So batting is not included here. And I think that's where kind of the instructions go wrong, because she doesn't tell you anywhere to put batting. And we're putting batting inside of our other blocks when we go to piece it. So we have a couple of things that we can do. If you're going to piece in the hoop in this manner, when you do this step, color stop 4 here, where it stitches that outside trim line, you will want to turn your hoop to the wrong side and position your batting. Okay? And then you can either run it again so that it holds your batting in place, or you can quilt right over top of it. Okay? And provided that you assume that it's staying in place, but I would either tape it or do the tack down so that it stays. Okay? So that's my only problem with here, is that they don't talk to you about where to put batting at. And again, we quilt everything else with batting. Why wouldn't we be quilting these with batting? So here is what I do. I took my pieces. I sewed them together with a 1/2 inch seam. Now I have placed fusible woven on the wrong side of my fabrics. And the reason I did that, they don't tell you to do it, but the reason I did it was because every other piece of fabric in our quilt has fusible woven on the back of it. And if we don't put fusible woven on this, it feels slightly different than the others. And I just want everything to be the same weight and the same feel. So I put fusible woven on the wrong side of all of my filler blocks. You can see I use little pieces. These are very oversized. Okay, remember, these are going to get trimmed down to 2.5 by 4.5. And right now they are like 3.5 by 5.5. Okay. So I went through and I pieced them together with a 1/2 inch seam, and I pressed the 1/2 inch open. I double checked to make sure we're good. This is plenty big enough to get to trim down to a 2.5 by 4.5. All right. That's the first thing I did. Then we are going to move over to the design. And I created the design just like we created the design earlier. Okay, so let's put the hoop on. We're going to go out here. We're going to skip color stop 1. You can run it if you want, but I don't really need all of those pieces. I mean, you can put them there. They'll allow us to skip a couple color stops later, but I just skip it. I'm going to skip color stop 2. Color stop 2 is going to give us our first trim line, but color stop 3 I'm going to stitch. This is that middle of our block. Okay, this is going to help us make sure that when we put this down for quilting, that we align our center pretty close so that we don't end up with an off-centered seam, if that makes sense. We don't want one fabric to be bigger than the other. So I'm going to run color stop 3. I'm then going to skip color stop 4. Okay, we don't have anything to tack down. We're just going to skip it. That brings us into our quilting design. We're going to run color stop 1. This is going to tell us where to put, or excuse me, in this case, color stop 5. This is going to tell us where to put our batting. So we're going to put our batting down, okay? And then we are going to skip the tack down of batting because I've already cut it to the 2x4 size. And then we're going to place the pieced unit on top, making sure that the pieced section of that unit lines up pretty close with the line that we stitched back in color stop 3. Once you have it aligned, you're going to run this color stop 7 here, which is going to tack this unit down. And then you can skip 8, and then you can quilt. All right. Now, you can do this 1 by 1 by 1 if you want. Now, personally, you know, I'm a big, let's maximize our stabilizer. Let's maximize all those hoops that we have. And let's use our, you know, we have the tools. We might as well use them. So we're going to put multiples in the hoop at the same time. So I've already created that for you. If you own a midi hoop, let's put a midi on here. Oops, nope, midi. Okay. You put a midi on, you can, I have to do a little bit of a movement here, but you can get 2 that run top to bottom and 1 that runs left to right, and it won't matter because the way you're going to put your fabric on there, it's going to be the right direction or the right orientation. So you can work through getting all 3 of these in one hoop. If you don't own a midi hoop, you can get 1 hooping with 1 single design with the medium hoop. Okay, so here's my medium hoop. I've already done 1. And then you can get the remaining 2 with the large oval with them running this direction in the hoop. Okay, so we're going to walk through. I am going to do 1 at a time. I'm not combining colors. I don't want to try to do 2 at a time, 1 at a time. Neutral color in our bobbin, and we are going to load up the taffy. My machine is set up. I've created my design. Again, my designs are going to run left to right. Okay, here they're going to be basically rotated 90 degrees so that we can orient them correctly. If you remember, we are going to take a look here at, we're going to be doing filler block 18 and filler block 16. Those are the 2 that are going to use taffy colored thread. Okay, and we're going to reference back to this here in a few moments. So I have my 2 units that I have pieced, 1/2 inch seam pressed open, and now we're going to head over to the machine. I am going to run 1 and get it quilted, and then run the second and get it quilted. I'm not going to try to do these at the same time. So in my design, I am going to skip ahead to color stop 3, and I'm going to run that color. Then I'm going to skip ahead to color stop 5, which is the first color stop of the quilting design, which is going to tell me where to put my batting. Batting in place, just like we've been doing. I'm going to skip to color stop 7, which is going to tack this down once I get it in place. Now, if I look at my design, okay, so let me show you. You want to make sure that you have the fabrics oriented in the correct direction. because if they're not, you're going to end up with, the wrong thing quilted in the wrong part of the fabric. No one's going to notice. We just need to make sure that we, try to do it right the first time. And if not, again, nobody's going to be looking at this with the instructions hanging right next to it. Here is what my design looks like. Okay. My deer are on the right-hand side. If I look at my screen capture, I am going to be working on filler block 16 first. And if my deer right now are on the right-hand side, I want to rotate my fabric so that my deer is on the right piece. Okay, so I am going to come over to my machine. My deer should be on this fabric. I'm going to line this up so that there's my center. Okay, I'm going to place this so that that seam is pretty close to that center. I want to make sure that I have a little bit above and beyond and left and right of that batting. And then we're going to run the next color stop, which is going to tack this in place. This line is also your trim line. Okay, so as long as you've caught fabric in that, you're fine, because you're going to be trimming to this line once we get everything out of the hoop. We're going to skip the next color stop, and we're going to skip to stitch the quilting portion of this file. All right, I'm going to repeat these steps down below. I'm going to skip the first, the second color stops. I'm going to stitch the third one. If you've combined your designs, it should be color stop 12. When your design is finished, you can take your project out of the hoop, and we're going to come over to the cutting table and we're going to trim all of our blocks. We're going to start with the ornament here, and the bell. This is going to get trimmed to 6.5. So just like we had for the ornament block back in December, or 2 videos ago, since I just got it finished, we are going to trim to 6.5. You can double check and verify that the fabric tack down line is correct, and then you can trim using that. Or if you have orange pop rulers, you can pull those out. Center it up, making sure that you are centered in the middle, and you're right there where that placement line is, or the tack down is. And then you can trim. There is our 2 6.5-inch squares of our bells for the month of February. Next up is going to be our pieced filler blocks. These need to measure 2.5 by 4.5 is what we're trimming to. Now, we don't have an orange pop ruler that matches that, but I do have a ruler that is 2.5 inches wide that I can also verify that I am 4.5 inches long, and I can cut around this ruler. If you have a hard time seeing it from the front, if you flip over to the back, the outside edge of that block, the outside stitching, is your trimming line. So you can flip it over and view it from the back side if you have a hard time seeing it from the front. And there is February. We have our 2 bells and our 3 pieced filler blocks. Now, there are the embellishments that coordinate with this. Those are those 2 large metal jingle bells. Just put them away in your kit, and we will pull them out when we are ready to attach embellishments in about, I don't know, maybe 8-9 months from now. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging out with me this month. Hope you learned a few new little tips and tricks. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave it comments below, or you can reach out to us on our website at materialgirlsquilt.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next month for the next installment of our Mistletoe Mystery project.